Hi, hello, my name is Jakob Freund, co-founder CEO of Camunda. It's great to have you here. This is about Camunda BPM. Maybe just asking quickly, who of you is already familiar with Camunda BPM? Just raise your hands if you know the software basically. Cool. Who of you are actually using Camunda BPM? Yeah, that's could be half. So some of you are not yet so familiar, which is good because we are also going to talk a bit about what Camunda actually is, what you can use it for, how does it work. There will be user presentations today, so let's just have a quick look at the agenda again. Today it's my own turn, so I'm going to tell you a bit about our mission as a company, what we actually have in mind for this kind of software product that we're developing, how this product actually works, about the components, and so on and so forth. So kind of setting the tone, if you like. And then there's going to be a live demo right away. So my lovely co-worker, I think Niall will do it. Is going to present Camunda Optimize, one of the tools in the stack, so that you get not just slides, but also a little live demo. And we're going to have a user talk presentation provided by Fritz. So Fritz is using, or his organization is using Camunda now for a while. He's going to talk about their experiences, and we're going to have lunch. So another topic that we're going to talk about today is microservices. Just wondering, who of you are already doing something with microservices? Just raise your hands if you do. So let's try some. Okay. So it's kind of a hot topic. Many, especially IT enterprise architects, are looking into this right now for good reason. And it has a lot to do with workflow automation, in fact, which is why it makes sense to talk about that today as well. This will be handled by Felix, one of our other consultants who's on site today. So Felix is going to talk about certain concepts in integrating microservices, as well as about a concept called external tasks that is implemented in Camunda BPM. So there will also be a live demo and actually also live coding. So since Camunda is meant to be used by developers, of course there has to be some source code to be shown at some point during this day. Camunda Cockpit, another tool for the stack, will be demonstrated live under Niall again. And then we're going to have a little break in the afternoon, followed by me again, talking about Camunda. Now towards IT executives. So we want to use Camunda. Very often it's being introduced in a more bottom-up fashion. So developers download it, they like it, they want to use it, they implement first prototypes, they want to go live in production, and at a certain point they have to make a case for Camunda towards their management. That can be a VP of software engineering, it can be the CIO, it can be a team lead, depends on the organization. So, and again, that IT executive, of course, also needs to be able to justify the usage of Camunda towards the CEO or whoever might have a say in that decision. So we have made some experiences around that, and I will try to share some of them with you, hopefully helpful. Then there will be another case study. This time it's Lasse. Is Lasse here? Yeah, here we are. Cool. So Lasse is going to talk about a pretty amazing and extensive project that leverages Camunda BPM. Unfortunately, he's not allowed to disclose the organization that is using it because it is partly about legacy application integration. But I think it's better to not know the name and get the details than vice versa. So therefore, I'm very happy to have Lasse here today. And then after a short break, there will be again live coding in the afternoon about an R&D project that we're working on called ZB. That's quite exciting, really. So I'm also going to mention it in my morning session, and then we're going to get hands-on in the afternoon with Felix again, live coding about ZB. And then you will have heard a lot, and hopefully you will not have fallen asleep by then. Hopefully you will still be awake and able and willing to have a few discussions with us about this kind of stuff that you learned about today, how you're using it, how you would like to use it, what's missing maybe from the technology, how you would like to contribute. Since it's open source, we have a lot of external contributors opening pull requests and asking for features, reporting bugs, etc. So therefore, of course, this day is also meant to be a get-together of people using and evaluating Camunda. Besides myself, Felix and Niall, there's also Madeleine on site today, the lady who welcomed you this morning. So when you have any questions about logistics, she's very happy to answer them. Then we have Stefan there in the back, our head of international sales. So when you say, hey, I would like to get in touch with Camunda, I would like to discuss a project, I would just like to have someone on site maybe presenting Camunda to my customers, etc. Stefan is a great go-to person, as well as Omar, one of Stefan's reports and sales. So we're all here to have hopefully interesting discussions with you about whatever you like to do with Camunda. All right, that's it for now. Anything missing? Anything that we need to tell about? Where's the bathrooms, for example?
The bathrooms are right here.
Okay.
It's next to the intense always.
Also the lunch, or is the lunch happening also in this room? Great. We don't have to go anywhere. You're stuck with us for the whole day.
Yes.
Please lock the doors. All right. So, I'm going to take this off now. As I said, I think it makes sense. If you're interested in Camunda, and not just the current state, the current snapshot of this product, I think it makes sense to understand what Camunda, the company, sees as their mission. I mean, there's many buzzwords like mission or vision or whatever, but what's driving this basically? Why are we doing this? Where are we headed? What do you expect from Camunda? I will also share a few details about the company, typical management details, but that's more the afternoon session, so I'm really focusing now on the product here. I'll do that, setting the context to some extent. And then, of course, we want to look at Camunda BPM. For those of you who are new, I will give a brief introduction, what's in there, what I can do with it, etc. And then, as I said, also a little teaser for the afternoon session. I'm describing the open source project, CB. All right. So, we have a clicker, which is better. Good. So, the Camunda Story, maybe. Just the context. So this company was founded 10 years ago already, so you can hardly call it a startup anymore, even though we would like to do that. So it's been founded 10 years ago by Bernd Drücker and myself, in a bootstrap fashion, which means that, I don't know if you're a bit familiar with this, crazy startup thing coming from the Silicon Valley. Bootstrap means that we didn't take any funding. So we did this in a way that we were basically able to get revenue from day one with consulting for business process management, because that was really our thing and still is our passion. So looking at processes and how they could actually work better. We did this for about 5 years in Germany predominantly, obviously. We wrote a book about it that became quite successful, that helped us a lot, and so on and so forth. We built a small team of around 15 consultants. And then 5 years later, we figured that, well, there's a lot of technology out there for automating business processes. A lot of products from companies such as IBM or Oracle or Software AG, and so on and so forth. Back then, a lot was about SOA and things like that. And we figured that those products didn't meet the requirements of a certain part of the market. And we kind of called that part a part that needs developer-friendly BPM. So organizations that do software development themselves, that have a staff of software engineers, that want to get their hands on technology that they can actually use right away without necessarily learning a proprietary vendor-specific way of application development. There's more to it, but that was basically the idea back then. But pretty much against the mainstream, really. So it's not that people, or especially executives, were actually asking for that. It was more the other way around. They were asking for model-driven development and low-code and things like that. So we were kind of against the mainstream here, against Gartner specifically, and Forrester and other big analyst firms. But we still did our thing. We launched Camunda BPM as an open source project in 2013, and this is when things became interesting. You can see it here in Google Trends when you look for Camunda, how it developed as a topic over time. So the first 5 years we had fine and modest, and then since 2013 it has become more of a thing that people are looking for over the course of the past 5 years. So what's fast forward? What's the situation today? We believe we are kind of the technology of choice when it comes to workflow automation. Both the open source platform as well as the enterprise platform. So the open source platform is being used, for example, by Goldman Sachs or the NASA guys for their space missions, like Mars 2020, which is very exciting for us, of course, processing Mars orbit, which is, and also the enterprise platform, which is the commercial version that people have to pay for, which comes with warranties and support. And additional tools, which of course accelerates development and increases the security during operations. So this version is used by more than 200 organizations as of today. A lot of them are from the insurance industry, like Allianz. Some are from the media industry, like Universal, for example. They deliver their digital content, like music clips and video clips, through Spotify and iTunes and Amazon Music via Camunda. So they're running this workflow in Camunda, for example. Automobile, there's different units in German Telekom that use Camunda. One of them is T-Mobile Austria. When you go to one of those shops in Vienna, for example, and purchase a SIM card contract, that process is handled by Camunda. So it's also, again, pretty much the core business processes that we're executing in this technology. So that's nice. What's really driving us in the broader sense? And I don't want to become too like philosophical here or whatever. Well, it was just about to become like, philosophical. No, not really. But why are we so into business processes in the first place? I mean, two guys setting out, building their business about business process management. Why would they do that? What's so fascinating about it? And who captured that quite well is a guy called Harari. I don't know if you know, Harari has written another book which is called Brief History of Humankind. Have you ever heard of that? Who has written that book? Well, read that book. Okay, that's a few. I would really recommend that. If you're a bit into history, it's a great summary of mankind's history in a way that's really enlightening. So I can highly recommend that. It's called Sapiens, Brief History of Humankind. He has written another book which is called Homo Deus, which is more about like the outlook in the 21st century. Very interesting thoughts in there as well. Very, very recommendable. One of his core thoughts, core statements in the beginning of the book is that he believes the 21st century will be dominated by the concept of algorithms in the broadest sense. And he thinks it's actually the single most important concept in our world. And he's not an IT guy, okay, so he's an historian. So he believes algorithms is the most important concept. And he explains it a bit. I mean, we being from the IT, of course, we have an idea what an algorithm is, so that's not really surprising. When you look at, or when you read it through, you will actually figure that what he's describing is very much what we understand as business processes on a certain level of granularity. And when you make the conclusion, you will figure out that what happens in corporations in terms of business processes is actually algorithms that are executed again and again and again. So the concept of business processes is really the concept of algorithms within an organization. And having this very fundamental, basic principle in mind, that explains a lot and lets you conclude a lot around digital transformation, what it actually means. So being able to handle those algorithms is key when it comes to this thing called digital transformation. We'll circle back to that later. BPMN now is a very interesting standard that some of you, of course, know. An ISO standard that comes with a certain set of symbols. More than 60 symbols, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is, again, the principle behind it, the really basic mechanic. So BPMN allows us to say in a very, apparently simple manner what happens under certain circumstances. So it's an if-then logic, really. That's an algorithm. So we say, okay, if an event occurs, for example, a message has been received, like an order has been received, or a certain time span has passed, or a certain event, like a signal has been received or whatever, or if a task has been completed, or if data have certain values, which is expressed by the so-called database exclusive gateway. One of those things happen, and we then draw a certain conclusion. So we act in a way. For example, we're just waiting. Our week of engineering is always saying our engine is great at waiting. So we're waiting for an event to occur at a certain point, and then deciding, based on the kind of event, how to proceed. Or we announce an event, so we say, yes, a certain event has occurred. If you're a bit into microservices and sub-patterns, then you should be excited about that. Or we say, okay, a certain task is supposed to happen. So we need to trigger tasks. Using this very simple set of logic, we can describe basically any business process as an algorithm on a certain level of granularity, which is higher than source code, but not so high that it's just fuzzy flip chart or PowerPoint slides. It's something in between, which allows us to describe how our business works in a way that is directly executable in source code. So this is what Camunda does, but also other engines do. There's probably a few dozen engines to do that. So we serialize BPMN flowchart diagrams actually in good old XML, which was at the time of definition the typical standard. But that's fine, because we don't have to touch this. So what we do is we serialize that as standard compliant XML, just like all the other vendors do. Then any BPMN compliant workflow engine can interpret that serialized flowchart and just run it. It's important to understand that we're serializing, we're not transforming. That's a big difference. Transformation happened back in the days towards people or whatever. But this is the direct, one-on-one representation of this flowchart in a standardized way. Okay, so this means that we have this flowchart diagram that describes our business as an algorithm in a way that is directly executable. So what can we do with this now? Well, besides a lot of shortcuts for developers and lots of solutions doing tech operations, to get this business visibility, obviously. And it's not about business building their own applications. That is low code, and that doesn't make too much sense really. But it's about business being more involved and being better informed about their business processes that are running in production. So for example, here we have a screenshot from this tool called Optimize that Niall is going to present. One of the features here is the so-called heat map that people love. So they tell us at one time which parts of the process are executed most often, which might come in handy when I'm looking for bottlenecks or other potentials for improvement. So we're getting this in real time. You know, it's not like the imported data or data warehouse station, BI or whatever. This is a direct view on the running source code from a business point of view, from a business angle. And therefore we can actually complete this continuous improvement cycle, which of course, you know, is not a silver bullet. It's just a very helpful instrument. So BPMN is a standard, very successful, because it is relatively easy to understand for people reading those diagrams. It's relatively clear how to execute it, and this again is already, or this already is unique to a certain extent. But then also, it's like, French we say arrivé, it's an established, derived ISO standard. So this means that it's just here, it's there now, and therefore we can expect this to stay, a bit like UML maybe or whatever, which isn't perfect, but you know, now it has filled this gap. This is why we believe that BPMN as a language for this most important concept of our century for organizations, algorithms, will be around for a while, regardless of Camunda as a vendor. There's a thing called DMN, and I always like to say BPMN and DMN are a bit like Batman and Robin. And this is actually the only, from my end, the only good version of Batman and Robin is this TV show back in the days. You know, when superheroes didn't have to have a good body shape or cool outfits, they were allowed to look confused or just grinning, you know, so that's the good old days. And Batman and Robin, in the sense that we have this BPMN, which is about algorithms, about workflows, which is about certain technical challenges like weight states in between that are really hard to solve for a decent workflow engine. And then we have DMN, which is about, well, mostly about decision tables that allow us to express complex, again, if-then algorithms that are stateless, basically, in a fashion that is, again, easy to digest by the business side, even can be driven by the business side to some extent. And those two standards are very complementary. You can use them standalone, you can do just DMN, like, for example, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, where are you using it? Can I name the organization? Can I say that your organization's name? Like SCAT, for example, here in Copenhagen, are using DMN, so if you're interested in that, I'm sure that Jan is happy to talk about that. So using DMN only so far, we have many organizations that are using BPMN only, and we also have many organizations that are using the both of them combined. Because it makes a lot of sense to make use of these decision tables in between the workflow execution. And again, this is not about standards. So the question, of course, is how does that play together with Camunda as a software? So we see our mission in providing solutions to these problems around workflow and decision automation. Those problems are often around software development. There's lots of shortcuts. It's a bit like a database. You wouldn't call that yourself anymore. There's databases out there. You can just use that. Same goes for workflow engines and decision engines. Solving problems doing technical operations, a thing that is often forgotten in the beginning, but actually very critical and also very difficult if you scale to a certain point. Once you have a certain throughput, you need to make sure that you are reliable and highly available. And of course we have this element of business visibility that I just mentioned around these. Alright, so this means that, like in a nutshell, what's our mission, why are we here, what's our passion? We always look at the business processes in any organization and we always wonder, okay, to what extent can we automate them? How we want to make them as automated as possible. That's what we find most interesting. And therefore this is all that you can expect from us when it comes to technology that we're building and we're sharing in an open source way or selling in an enterprise way. Okay, so much for the introduction. Let's have a quick look at this product now, what it means. So when we look at those projects, it's often very important to understand that they consist of a certain set of personas working together. So very often we have some business unit that needs some kind of workflow automation solution. Hey, our claim settlement, we have insurance, our claim settlement takes too much time, too much manual work. We would like to have a more automated way of doing this. Okay, so we're testing that. Like with the IT, we're putting a project request or solution request with our CIO or VP of engineering, and this poor fellow then has to figure it out and provide a solution in some way. Often leveraging certain other people in their staff, like developers, architects, etc. This is a typical setup that we have when we're looking at Camunda BPM and how it's being used. That's important to have in mind because all those people have very different angles and requirements and attitudes even towards those solutions. So we need to provide a solution that actually meets all those different requirements and angles. So we now look at Camunda BPM, the technology stack, and this is reflected here. So we look at those typical project stages like we're modeling our workflows and decisions, we're executing them in the engines, and we then want to improve what we have built. So we have, for example, a tool called Modeler, which is a very easy to use lightweight desktop application. It's open source that you can download, and you can use it to create BPMN flowchart diagrams and those DMN decision tables. It's realized, as I said, in a standard compliant way. And you can use those models then in order to let them run by deploying them to the engines. So technically it's two engines really, one is for BPMN, one is for DMN, both very lightweight, both coming with Java REST APIs. They can be integrated, or they're integrated if you like, and this pre-built distribution. Using relational databases of different kinds like Postgre or Microsoft SQL Server or DB2 or Oracle in order to handle, for example, state and for the workforce and also the models that are deployed. This is now running under the hood, obviously, and many of our customers use Camunda in a headless fashion. So they say, okay, we're just using the engines exposed by our API. We don't use any out-of-the-box front ends because we want to build that ourselves, for example. That's not uncommon. For example, for software vendors who want to provide workflow features within their products. We do have certain front ends that you can use right away. So there's an inbox for the task list. For the task workers, people working in the processes, completing tasks that are assigned to them. There is a cockpit, which is the technical operations tool. Very important, as I said, doing operations, making sure that everything runs smoothly. It's a bit like, this is a car engine. This is more like the windshield of your car. So you don't want to drive it out. You want to see where you're going, not drive up the next wall. Comparing to that, maybe Optimize is more for GPS. Which means that Optimize is a tool meant to be used by the process owners, like business line managers, for example, and it provides soft real-time reports, dashboards, monitoring, and alerts on a business level about what's going on. Like, for example, the heat maps, but there's more to it. Technically, this is working on Elasticsearch, big data repository, so we're always pulling in the data from the relational database to make sure that it's up to date, but we need this big data repository for the complex queries that we of course need to handle here. Admin in between, about users, permissions, making sure that people are only allowed to do certain things on all levels, the web applications, the REST API, the Java API, so here you can handle that, integrate it with your Active Directory via LDAP or whatever, and therefore make it useful to the organization. Alright, when you look at the pure feature level, to a certain extent you can say most is open source. So everything that is green here is open source. I'm saying to a certain extent because I would say the majority of what you can do with Cockpit is not open source. So once you get to a certain point when you're using Camunda in an enterprise scenario, you must make the decision if you want to build this kind of tool yourself, which you can do of course, or if you want to sign up with us for an enterprise license, then you get this tool out of the box and the respective maintenance and support for the whole stack. The same is true, of course, for Optimize, which is also meant to be used by our enterprise customers. All right. So, as always, I want to avoid running over time, and I'm seldom successful. I'll do my best. So, very quickly, when we map now the stack to the respective stages in those projects, how does that really apply? So, in the beginning of those projects, we often have the situation we want to design to be workflows and decisions. So we need to involve business unit stakeholders, the IT experts like developers, architects, whatever. The solution here is obviously this common language with BPMN and DMN, so we can actually directly see what they're going to execute and we can actually try that out right away. There is this modeler that I can use here that is being used a lot, which might be interesting behind the scenes wise. We also have a software as a service tool called Carimo, which stands for Camunda Web Modeler, that we have launched a year ago already, that we're currently aligning more closely with the execution stack. This goes even a bit beyond the local modeler. It comes with multi-user features like inviting others to collaborate on the models, commenting on certain steps, things like that. So if that's interesting, feel free to approach us or just observe what's going on there. Yeah, and obviously here we have a broad diversity of people that we want to involve. Doing implementation, clear, we need to build this stuff. So there's certain efforts in software engineering, those cost time and money. And what I just said about databases is also true for workflow engines. So here, of course, the value is that we get certain stuff out of the box. We don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to workflow automation. At the same time, in a very flexible and open architecture, this is why developers typically prefer this over, the heavyweight, like proprietary, closed source BPMS products that are out there. Doing operations, I just mentioned that. Don't underestimate that. That is like as soon as you go into more serious projects, this is going to be a very important matter that is often more tricky than you think in the beginning. So we need to make sure that we are able to handle high volume transactions at a certain point, depending on our business, of course. This is about throughput, scalability. We need to maybe have certain requirements regarding always on, like the 5 nines in the telecom industry, so high availability. There's certain setups, like active mode and cluster, things like that. So a lot of stuff that we need to consider here. How does Camunda help? Well, the engine is on a certain level of maturity here, obviously. We have this tool called Cockpit, which is very sophisticated. Has been driven the past 5 years by customers like T-Mobile and others who have those very large or changing requirements. And of course, what I mentioned about admin regarding security authorization. And then improvement, as I just said, it's nice to know that our processes are running technically sound and there's no incidents or errors or whatever, but forgive the language, but someone once said, I think it was the telecom CEO, if I automate a shitty process, I still have a shitty process. It's just automated. So that doesn't really help me. So how do I figure that out? By looking at the business implications of my technically correct process. And this is about transparency, that the truth is not just in source code or technical logs, it's actually visible right away. It's not real time, which is better than a BI or data warehouse tool that typically comes with staging every day or week or whatever. So I wouldn't get within seconds an alert when things go out of hand, for example. And therefore we have this tool called Optimize that Miles is going to demonstrate. We are building this product now. We have been building this now for 5 years, and we released a new version of it exactly on time every 6 months, 5 years running now. So we really got used to this time box approach of software development. This means we can always say, with this 100%, let's say 90% certainty, when you can expect the next release of Camunda BPM, you just can't say what's going to be in there. So that's of course the trade-off, but that works for us pretty well because we have a prioritized backlog, which then of course has a certain probability in terms of which features you can expect in the next upcoming release. So 7 or 10 scheduled for November the 30th, and then of course next 5 years I guess will be the same. So every half year new release of Camunda BPM. Yeah, so what is actually coming up here? Very briefly, and then it makes sense maybe to discuss that during the break. So there's a thing called external task pattern that's very popular. Also to a certain extent related to microservices. Felix is going to talk about that. Large scale deployments, I mentioned that. So if I produce lots of data, for example, how can I handle that? Optimize is relatively new, so we still get a lot of feedback here that we're incorporating into this part of the stack. And UX, of course. Okay, problem now is that I'm officially out of time, so that might be a bit difficult to convey. No, I'm not?
You have 10 minutes.
Oh, yippee, 10 more minutes. Yeah. Sorry for you. Okay.
I told you you have less because you always do overtime.
Yeah, true. No, but that's perfect, that's fine. But I did actually plan correct.
You can always push the release.
Follow me?
You can push the release.
I was about to make this joke actually that I think we have an organization that is really disciplined when it comes to time. So for example, we almost never overrun a meeting or whatever, meeting time. The only exception is myself. I'm really bad at it. I almost always overrun it, even when it comes to presentations. So this is not credits for me regarding this aspect of Camunda. So ZB, what is ZB about? ZB is an R&D project. It's not a product or anything. It's a project that we have started a few years ago. Why did we do that? It's related to what I said initially about this algorithm thing and the relevance and how we reflect everything that happens in algorithms in organizations with BPMN to be expected. And there's certain other developments that we're seeing in the industry. So for example, I attended the Kafka Summit, Apache Kafka Summit in London recently. There was an interesting presentation from ING Bank. And they said one of the big transformations right now is that they try to go real-time. They want to become a real-time bank. And what they mean by that is that customers have certain expectations. Things like Amazon are nowadays kind of a benchmark, and they want to have similar experiences with other service providers. So they had this example about international payments. When people travel to certain countries, they often have to activate certain services regarding the bank accounts or whatever. And the problem so far is that when I do this and I request certain activation via the website, it typically takes a day before I actually get this activation, which isn't obviously real time, and which is apparently not acceptable anymore. That's what they said. So they do not consider this kind of behavior, like a day of delay, acceptable anymore. So why that delay in the first place? Is there any manual interaction? Actually not. It is already an automated process. The problem is, it's batch processing, which we see in many organizations, and banks and insurances and others. Batch processing means they're collecting certain requests over the course of a day, for example, and then they execute this whole batch overnight, which is often due to, for example, performance reasons that they have to do it on their good old mainframe running COBOL code at night, that the mainframe is not affected, and things like that. Sometimes there's business reasons for batch processing, but not that often really. So they want to get away from that. They have to get away from batch processing, and that is a huge endeavor. It's really difficult. So I tweeted about that because I found it interesting, because I see a big workflow, they call it a big workflow, this kind of problem, because it's about like a lot of elements in those batches. So I found it interesting, and actually the enterprise architect, Derek Vanderweer, who I also happened to meet recently, who's responsible for all that, answered, yeah, we see this problem and interesting stuff because we do see the connection between workflow and what they call the event-driven enterprise. So this is it's all connected literally in this case. And we talk about this kind of transformation, we talk about microservices and event-driven architectures, the emergence of EDA. This is highly connected to workflow automation. Another thing is, I mentioned microservices. We're going to look at those today. Netflix, who are kind of the pioneers in microservices, they have released an open source project 1.5 years ago already called Microservices Orchestration Engine named Netflix Conductor. So when I don't know, is anyone using Netflix in this room? Anyone a Netflix customer? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. That's good. Just making sure. So when you hit the play button in Netflix when you watch your favorite TV show, like Batman, for example, then hundreds of microservices play together. Look, you can read it up if you like, in order to stream that TV show onto your computer. So they have those microservices, very complex microservices architectures. Problem now for them was at a certain point, because microservices are supposed to be autonomous and decoupled, etc., etc. Problem was after a while, well, they have a thing that they call business processes, driven by asynchronous orchestration of tasks, executing microservices. Some are long running, which means they don't spend just seconds or milliseconds, but actually several days, such as setting up a TV show on Netflix, for example, in order to make it available. So those processes have been orchestrated ad hoc manner using combination of publish subscribe or request response calls using REST and so on. Problem is now as the number of microservices grow and the complexity of processes increase, visibility has become an issue. So those workflows are distributed and they don't really know what's going on anymore. So they have this lack of transparency now, and they need what they call a central orchestrator. When you look at this thing, it's open source, we look at this technology, it's a workflow engine. That's what they did basically. It's a state machine for orchestrating microservices. So Netflix did that, and others do it as well. So you will find, for example, a thing called Uber Cadence, which coincidentally is called a distributed, scalable, durable, highly available orchestration engine for asynchronous, long-running business logic. And it's not that they're like in a club or whatever. So this has happened independently. Same as happened at ING Bank. They call it Baker. It's a thing about orchestrating microservice-based process flows. So this is happening in different areas now. And there's clearly a pattern about this problem, obviously. The thing now is that, I think I have it here, let's see. that when you look at it again from a, like, you know, in the broader picture, what we believe is going to happen is a thing that we call big workflow, more internally really as a marketing term. It's maybe not that way. But as a working title for us, it's helpful. So we had this thing called big data. You know, people asked 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever, well, we have databases. We have Oracle and DB2 and so on. So why would we need anything else like MongoDB or Elasticsearch or Cassandra? So why would that matter? And those technologies matter a lot nowadays. And those vendors are very relevant. So that was because the data problem of storing and reading data has not yet been solved on a massive scale. Or we can't do that on a massive scale, like a real massive scale. Mongo and Cassandra can to a certain extent. So we believe that this problem has an equivalent when it comes to workflows, to activities that are distributed, maybe even across data centers, across continents, that are highly complex, that are long running, as Netflix just called it, and that are mission critical, that are core business. And this problem has not yet been solved, not even by us, on a massive scale, like a real massive scale. This means that Camunda BPM, for example, which is, we believe, cutting edge in terms of workflow automation as of today, is able to, for example, on a single computer start around 1 to 200 workflow instances per second. Well, okay, 200 workflow instances per second is probably quite sufficient for most of us, but it's not what we would say on a massive scale. And that's because we are also working with relational databases. That's the only bottleneck. Whenever it comes to persistence, in memory is not an issue, but persistence is an issue when it comes to massive scale workflow automation. So this is why we have decided to think about workflow from scratch in an entirely new fashion and created an R&D project called ZB. And again, as I just said, Camunda BPM is fine, solving a lot of use cases, and it's going to solve them long term. So we're very happy with this product. And at the same time, if that's also just our passion, we're interested in, okay, could we do workflow automation on a massive scale, like not hundreds, but millions of workflows per second? And how would that work? That would only work if we persisted workflow in a totally different way. Not with database tables and queries, but in an append-only log fashion, like it's also done, for example, by Kafka, and in a way that is then horizontally cluster or scalable in a cluster using so-called brokers. Felix is going to give a demo about that. So very quickly, we're seeing here a throughput that is on par with Kafka, for example, when it comes to events per second that can be processed. We're seeing a scalability that goes, for example, up to 1 million per second on an AWS cluster that Felix tested recently. So here, of course, we see entirely different use cases, especially when we combine that again with the aspect of visibility. So we already are able to stream those events then to Elasticsearch, looking at them with Camunda Optimize, providing heat maps, for example, for millions of workflow instances and things like that. So this is just a little update if you're interested in those kind of things. This is not production ready or anything, it's R&D. So we have a team working on that. It's open sourced already, so you can just look it up on cb.io. We're also working with key users already that are interested in that kind of stuff, like OpenSex, for example, expressed interest. And therefore, we're working towards 1.0 towards the end of the year. That is then also production ready. If you'd like to stay updated, visit the blog, follow us on Twitter, so just talk to us, of course. Yeah, we find that exciting, so that's what I wanted to share with you. I'm right on time. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.